The Houthis never saw it coming. One moment their leadership was business as usual in Yemen. The next, US fighter jets launched from a Navy aircraft carrier rained down hell, striking targets across multiple cities in what's now being called the largest US military operation in the Middle East under Trump's presidency. Over 30 people killed, more than 100 injured, and the real shock, this is just the beginning. Because this isn't just about a single strike, it's about sending a message, not just to the Houthis, but to Iran, the real power behind the scenes. So why did the US hit the Houthis now? What does this have to do with the Israel-Hamas war? And is this the start of something much bigger? Let's break it all down, starting with the actual attack that was conducted in Yemen on Trump's orders. Unfortunately, we don't have many details to work with, as the US and Israeli forces are understandably tight-lipped about what exact equipment or forces they use on any given operation. The attacks mainly targeted vital military compounds in the Houthi-controlled area of Yemen, namely the cities of Sana'a and Taiz, where eyewitness reports suggest that strikes hit various buildings throughout the cities, causing severe damage. Another strike was reported in the town of Dayan in Sada, which is a common meeting spot for the Houthis' leader Abdul Malik al-Houthi and visiting foreign dignitaries, such as those from Iran or other Iran-backed proxies. While the extent of the attack wasn't actually revealed, reports suggest that this was the biggest US military operation in the Middle East since Trump took office in January this year. The move, announced by Trump himself, is a clear message to the organization to stop its hostile activities toward Israel and the Red Sea. Trump's exact message on his Truth Social platform states, "To all Houthi terrorists, your time is up, and your attacks must stop. Starting today. If they don't, hell will rain down upon you like nothing you have ever seen before." The message once again showcased Trump's frequent usage of social media to conduct international diplomacy or make demands from other nations and states. Although considering that the Houthis are classified as a terrorist organization, that might not matter as much. What we do know about the attack is that the series of strikes were conducted by fighter jets deployed from the US aircraft carrier stationed in the Red Sea. The USS Harry S. Truman aircraft carrier was the ship in question, which was previously used to conduct similar operations against Iranian proxies. In fact, it could be said that this aircraft is one of the US Navy's go-to vessels for military operations in the Middle East. So let's find out a little bit more about it. Commissioned on July 25, 1998, the USS Harry S. Truman has become an integral component of US naval power projection, capable of deploying anywhere around the globe. In particular, the carrier had often been stationed in or around the Red Sea, patrolling the coastal waters surrounding the Arabian Peninsula. The Truman typically carries around 60 to 90 aircraft, including FA-18 Hornets, Super Hornets, EA-18G Growlers, E-2 Hawkeyes, and various helicopters. This range of aircraft gives it incredible operational variety and functionality, allowing it to conduct missions far into the peninsula without retaliations. More specifically, the gamut of fighter and air superiority jets on the carrier, combined with US intelligence capabilities in the region, allow the US Navy to exercise near complete air superiority in most countries, with the possible exception of Iran, as the latter has its own stock of anti-air equipment purchased from Russia. Since its commissioning, the USS Harry Truman has actively participated in several major combat operations and strategic missions. Its first notable deployment occurred in November 2000 as part of the US Navy's maritime operations in the Mediterranean Sea and the Persian Gulf. Following the attacks of September 11, 2001, the USS Truman became entrenched in Operation Enduring Freedom. The carrier supported intensive air campaigns against Taliban and al-Qaeda targets in Afghanistan, launching thousands of combat sorties and projecting and demonstrating US military strength during a critical phase of the conflict. In 2003, the Truman once again played a crucial role in Operation Iraqi Freedom, becoming a key platform for launching airstrikes against Iraqi military and infrastructure targets. Operating predominantly from the eastern Mediterranean, the Truman's hub fleet conducted numerous sorties, significantly contributing to the initial stages of the invasion and subsequent stabilization missions. Its presence underscored America's naval reach and served as an essential logistical hub for operations throughout the campaign for all parties involved in the operation, which were composed of various NATO allies. Throughout the subsequent decade, the Truman continued to provide vital support during multiple rotations in the Middle East. It was actively involved in sustained combat operations against ISIS as part of Operation Inherent Resolve, starting in late 2015. Operating primarily in the Persian Gulf and the Mediterranean, its aircraft conducted strikes against ISIS positions in Iraq and Syria, supporting coalition ground forces and significantly impacting terrorist infrastructure and logistics capabilities. In more recent years, the USS Harry S. Truman has become increasingly important due to heightened geopolitical tensions, particularly involving Russia and Iran. In 2022, the Truman was central to NATO maritime operations in response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, providing reassurance to European allies and projecting NATO air power capability in Eastern European waters. Then, in 2023, when the conflict between Israel and Hamas started and gained traction, the aircraft carrier was called upon again to provide power projection into the Middle East. The carrier was deployed into the Mediterranean Sea and then crossed into the Red Sea in 2024. As such, this ship is one of the US Navy's most vital assets surrounding the region at the moment, providing vital naval and aerial support to Israel, one of the largest recipients of US aid and donations over the past 50 years. And the USS Harry S. Truman is only one of 11 aircraft carriers that the US Navy currently operates. This means the US could theoretically mount an attack that's multiple times more numerous and powerful, using only aircraft carriers and the fleets of jets that are stationed on them. It's a dangerous precedent for the Houthis to face, especially given how much they stand to lose. But who are the Houthis, and why did they become the targets for these attacks? The Houthi movement, known formally as Ansar Allah, initially maintained its conflict primarily within Yemen, focusing on a prolonged civil war to overthrow the local government and install its own people at the helm of the country. Historically, their animosity towards Israel was mostly rhetorical, influenced heavily by their ideological ties with Iran and Hezbollah. Both of these entities, particularly Iran, were long-standing enemies of Israel, who were technically always in a state of cold conflict with the latter ever since the country's independence in the mid-20th century. However, the dramatic escalation of the Israel-Hamas conflict that began in October 2023 prompted a significant shift. The Houthis publicly positioned themselves as active supporters of Hamas and the Palestinian cause. This marked a transition from ideological opposition into direct, albeit limited, military engagement against Israel. Up until that point, the Houthis were economically and militarily supported by Iran, but the scale of this support wasn't enough for the movement to take over the entire country of Yemen. Instead, the Houthis controlled between 70 and 80% of the country's territory, including its capital city. But with the movement's open involvement in the conflict, Iran began supplying it with more and more weapons. This had a twofold effect on the movement. While the initial escalation of the conflict was the call to action for many Islamic factions surrounding Israel, it was Iran supplying vital weapons that truly allowed the Houthis to become a semi-active part of the conflict itself. From late October 2023 onwards, the Houthis began launching long-range drones and ballistic missiles targeting Israel from Yemeni territory, marking their first direct military action against the Israeli state. These strikes were largely symbolic rather than tactically effective, as most were intercepted by Israel's layered air defense systems, including Iron Dome, David's Sling, and the longer-range Arrow system. In at least one instance, the US deployed THAAD system also assisted in intercepting a ballistic missile. Still, the Houthis' ability to reach central Israel highlighted a major escalation in their capabilities, one that had previously been underestimated by Israeli intelligence. Although causing minimal direct damage initially, these strikes substantially elevated the Houthis' profile in the regional conflict, affirming their alignment with the broader axis of resistance, backed by Iran. With only limited success on Israeli soil, as pretty much every attack they launched turned out to be ineffective, the Houthis pivoted toward maritime warfare, dramatically broadening the scope of their campaign. They targeted commercial ships traversing the Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, crucial international maritime trade routes. Initially, their stated aim was to disrupt Israeli shipping interests specifically, but the Houthis also targeted vessels with limited or even no clear connection to Israel. In some cases, the ships belonged to the US and European private companies. These maritime attacks generated widespread international attention, with the global community labeling their actions as acts of piracy and terrorism. The escalation in maritime attacks also provoked the United States military to respond. In early 2024, the US launched Operation Prosperity Guardian, a naval and air operation aimed at safeguarding international shipping lanes and curtailing Houthi capabilities. US warships began actively patrolling in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, responding directly to threats against commercial vessels. This led to multiple military engagements, with US naval forces intercepting and destroying several Houthi drones and missile platforms. Simultaneously, US airstrikes targeted drone assembly facilities, radar installations, and military logistics hubs within Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen, significantly raising tensions and introducing a new dimension to the conflict. A pivotal escalation occurred on July 19, 2024, when a Houthi drone strike struck an apartment building near a US diplomatic office in Tel Aviv, killing 1 civilian and wounding 10 others. This marked the Houthis' first successful direct strike on an urban center within Israel, upping the conflict's diplomatic stakes. Israel promptly retaliated the next day with intensive airstrikes on Houthi military installations around the Yemeni port city of Hodeidah. This Israeli operation represented their first direct military intervention on Yemeni territory, indicating that the conflict had spread beyond the borders of Israel and Palestine. Throughout late 2024 and into early 2025, despite intensified American military operations aimed at neutralizing their maritime threat capabilities, the Houthis continued aggressively targeting Red Sea shipping lanes. The increasing US military pressure, however, has not halted the Houthis' commitment to their stated objectives, maintaining their public position of solidarity with Palestinian resistance movements. To that end, Trump's administration further moved the goalpost to widen the scope of its military campaigns in Yemen. The reported attack from the aircraft carrier is likely going to be the first among many, should the Houthis and the factions backing them continue with their attacks on Israeli soil and piracy on the seas. But in all that, the Houthis aren't actually the main target. That honor, if we can call it that, belongs to Iran. Iranian-Israeli relations have been characterized by long-standing hostility and mutual suspicion, shaped by ideological, geopolitical, and strategic factors. Since the Iranian Revolution in 1979, Iran has viewed Israel as an illegitimate state, frequently calling for its destruction. At the same time, Israel perceives Iran as its primary existential threat, particularly due to Tehran's support for anti-Israeli militia groups throughout the region. This mutual antagonism has manifested itself in decades of proxy conflicts, espionage operations, cyber attacks, and military strikes against each other's assets and allies. With the breakout of the conflict between Israel and Hamas, those relations only worsened. A critical aspect of Iran's regional strategy has been its extensive support for militant groups that surround and threaten Israel. Notably, Iran has actively backed Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza, various Shiite militia groups in Syria and Iraq, and the Houthis in Yemen. These groups provide Iran with strategic leverage, effectively extending Tehran's influence on Israel's borders and significantly complicating Israeli national security considerations. This axis of resistance strategy, directed primarily by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, aims to pressure Israel indirectly through sustained asymmetric warfare. Israel can only defend itself against these relentless attacks, as most of the proxies conduct themselves through long-range missiles and drones provided by Iran, remaining far from the conflict. Simultaneously, these groups constitute vital leadership roles in their country, even though they are more akin to terrorist associations than real political movements. This allows them a layer of control within their territories that makes them impossible to root out through conventional warfare or assistance methods. Instead, the militias frequently have control over large swathes of their country's territory, and Israel attacking them directly could escalate the conflict into a full-blown war, unsupported by the latter's allies such as the US and the UK. Iran's recent support for the Houthis in particular illustrates a shift in Tehran's strategic ambitions. Initially focused primarily on the Gulf region and Yemen's internal conflict, the Houthis have gradually become integrated into Iran's broader geopolitical objectives, including opposition to Israel. The escalating attacks from the Houthis are directly correlated with the increased activity from the Iranian military-industrial complex, as the militia groups lack the capacity to produce most of the weapons and equipment they own. The Iranian-Israeli conflict has also produced direct military confrontations, primarily through covert or indirect actions. Israel has repeatedly carried out airstrikes against Iranian military installations, missile depots, and infrastructure supporting militia groups in Syria and Lebanon. These strikes aim to degrade Iran's capability to equip its proxies with precision weaponry that could pose a direct threat to Israeli cities. The results of these attacks have been mixed, as while vital equipment has been destroyed, such as military compounds, supply lines, and even anti-air defense systems that Iran bought from Russia, the Iranian government hasn't slowed its support for smaller factions. Additionally, Iran has targeted Israeli interests through militia-led attacks, drone and missile strikes, and cyber warfare. For instance, numerous rocket attacks from Hezbollah and Iran-backed militias in Syria have targeted northern Israeli cities, prompting retaliatory strikes from Israel on Iranian facilities. This back and forth has further destabilized the region, as Israel has started to receive significantly bad press for continuing to attack its neighbors, despite claims that it's only defending itself. Perhaps the most concerning aspect of Iranian-Israeli tensions, and where the US might play a big role, involves Iran's nuclear program. Tehran insists its nuclear activities are solely for peaceful energy production and medical purposes. However, Israel and much of the international community believe that Iran seeks, or at least maintains the option, to produce nuclear weapons. Evidence supporting this suspicion includes Iran's extensive and accelerating construction of advanced nuclear material refinement facilities, notably uranium enrichment plants at Natanz and Fordow, and heavy water reactors like Arak. These plants are capable of enriching uranium to levels suitable not just for civilian energy, but potentially weapons-grade fissile material. Iran has significantly increased uranium enrichment capacity in recent years, operating advanced centrifuges capable of refining uranium at higher purity levels than previously achieved. Recent international monitoring reports indicate that Iran has enriched uranium to levels approaching weapons-grade purity, dramatically shortening the theoretical breakout time, the period required to produce enough fissile material for a nuclear weapon. Israel and the US see this development as an unacceptable existential risk. Which brings us full circle to the reason behind the escalating attacks on the Houthis. The threat of Iran making nuclear bombs goes beyond the purely theoretical, as the country has demonstrated that it has the resources and the material to actually create a nuclear bomb. However, Iran was technically barred from operating a nuclear weapons program, with Western and Eastern countries imposing severe restrictions on what it can and can't do. International diplomatic pressure and economic sanctions have significantly constrained Iran's nuclear ambitions. Global powers, led primarily by the US and Europe, have imposed extensive sanctions targeting Iran's economy, specifically its oil exports, banking systems, and industrial sectors. These sanctions caused profound economic difficulties, reduced international investment, and contributed to internal unrest. As such, for the longest time, Iran wasn't capable of economically supporting a nuclear weapons program. Secondly, the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, an agreement signed between Iran and the P5+1, comprised of the US, UK, France, China, Russia, plus Germany, imposed strict limitations and extensive monitoring of Iran's nuclear activities. The original agreement effectively placed Iran's nuclear program under rigorous international scrutiny, temporarily limiting its ability and willingness to pursue weaponization openly. The fear of triggering even harsher international consequences or military action deterred overt nuclear weapons production. However, the US withdrew from this agreement in 2018, and it's unclear just how much control and insight the other members of the agreement have over Iran's fissile material production and refinement. Thirdly, the threat of direct military intervention has significantly influenced Iranian decision-making. Israel has repeatedly stated that it would carry out preemptive military strikes against Iranian nuclear facilities should Tehran attempt to develop nuclear weapons openly. Likewise, successive US administrations have not ruled out military options. This credible threat of military retaliation, which has proved yet again in the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict, where Israel specifically targeted vital Iranian installations, means that Iran would have a very short time to create a nuclear bomb in secret before Israel declared open war and use its more advanced conventional equipment. Fourth, internal political and ideological considerations within Iran's leadership structure have also affected Iran's ambitions. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei publicly issued a religious decree or fatwa, declaring nuclear weapons forbidden under Islamic law, thus creating an ideological barrier to nuclear weapon development. Although international skepticism exists regarding the sincerity and permanence of this declaration, Iran has repeatedly referenced this decree in its diplomatic communications to affirm its non-weaponization intentions. However, given the state of Iran's construction efforts and repeated attempts to undermine the Israeli state through both covert actions and open long-range attacks, it's not out of the realm of possibility that the country has already secretly reversed course and implemented a nuclear weapons program. A review from the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists suggests that there's practically no way to predict a timeline for when Iran might have a nuclear weapon ready. What is known is that the country's more advanced nuclear material refinement plants can theoretically produce bomb-worthy fissile material, but not its quantities. The bulletin suggested that the Iranian program is similar to the early Chinese nuclear program, but that Iran would likely get a significant head start due to its more advanced technology or insight from the Chinese program. After all, China built its bombs in the late 1960s. As such, the bulletin indicates that it might take as little as a few weeks for Iran to create a nuclear device once it's mined and refined enough material for it. However, that still leaves its publicity as a primary concern. Iran would need to conduct nuclear weapons tests to ensure that its new armament is effective. These tests can't be disguised as something else or hidden from US intelligence, as tests require a small detonation of fissile material which leaves evidence in atmospheric conditions and geological markers, both of which the US can track. In a way, Trump escalating the attacks on the Houthis is a direct message to Iran that the country would never be safe if it creates and announces that it has nuclear weapons. At the first mention of a nuclear bomb, the US Navy would likely deploy overwhelming force to pacify Iran, initially by removing its existing government. This could result in a situation similar to the War on Terror during the early 2000s, which doesn't bode well for international geopolitics or relations between the various countries in the Middle East. But what do you think? Will Iran back off from attacking Israel, or will the US continue its assault? Thank you for watching, and leave your comments below.